Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. Earlier this week we spoke specifically about new Orisa and how good she was. In this video we're really going to be looking at the tanks as a whole and to see how these new changes really do shake up the tank meta in very interesting ways we have never seen before in the history of Overwatch. Joining me is Evil Toaster yet again to talk about the tanks and their future, and you can check him out at twitch.tv/Evil Toaster, but let's get straight into this video. So I guess first things first, what do you think of the patch? Just at a glance.
At a glance, without thinking too far into the future, I think it's really good. I think that they're recognizing what parts of tanking and interacting with tanks are not fun, which is the barrier part. And they're going to try to reduce that across the board, while also giving tanks a little something else in return that lets them have more tools to interact with all other characters in a way that is fun. So making tanks more fun is definitely something that, I've always asked for, especially, because there's very few people playing tank on the ladder, and that has some effects on the queue and the meta, just overall. So this is good at face value, and like everything else, it's really hard to think about. We can't really predict until it's there, but the immediate goal and the overall goal, just making Overwatch better, this is a pretty good step in that direction.
I guess much like everything, this patch will devolve into 6 to 8 heroes that you can't really run without, but I guess we'll talk about that towards the end of the video, who those heroes could be. But the kind of thing I wanted to ask, the last time that we spoke, you brought up the fact that the main problem in the game when it comes to role queue is tanks, because people don't want to queue tanks, because it's fairly boring, it has very little impact if you're just running double barrier. Yet it seemed necessary. Was this change more about the balance aspect of Overwatch, or like you said, fixing the problems that role queue now has with like 20-minute queue times and incentivizing people to play tank?
That'd be pretty interesting, because you could definitely see it from that angle where Blizzard's like, we don't really want to touch the balance of power or the musical chairs of like which tanks are the best right now, because all of the barrier tanks got hit in pretty much the same way. Except for Winston, but does he really count as a barrier tank? It's like, not really. So you could say that Blizzard is just like, we need to make tanks overall more fun. And that was their main concern, because they recognize, because it's easy to see. Like the queue tanks for supports and DPS are like 10 minutes or higher. It could go up to like 20, 30, or even an hour sometimes if you're a high elo DPS player. I almost never have a queue time that is longer than 1 minute. Even like 30 seconds playing as a tank on the ladder. So I'm sure the people at Blizzard have seen this and are like, okay, there's clearly a problem with tanks. So I'm sure that that's part of it.
Because that's the main thing that sort of struck me personally, is this feels like it's a patch that's beyond just the actual balance of the game and what's meta. It's them kind of fundamentally changing how tanks work.
Pretty much, it's kind of like healing. And like healing, I'm sure will maybe one day be something that they address in a similar way. But the way it's always been in Overwatch with healers is we decide, okay, this hero does the most healing, so we have to pick them. And if you pick a character that does less healing, then it's like, oh, we can't pick them. Like how many times, like back when Mercy had to get balanced a lot, when she was going between 50 healing a second, 60 healing a second, that was enough for us to decide, okay, she's not good enough. Or now she does the most healing, so she's the best. It's just a matter of who has the most. And it's the same thing with barriers. It's like, okay, this set of heroes gives us the most barriers, so we have to pick them, because it's the barriers that are strong, not the tanks themselves.
This is a bit more of a controversial thing, but I feel like every tank that they've added in since launch, apart from Orisa, has tried to not be a main tank or an off tank. Like Hammond and Sigma are sort of in that middle ground. Do you think that's Blizzard, in a sense, attacking what a main tank would be by just destroying barriers to an extent? So that you can run 2 off tanks without it feeling like you're just soft throwing?
Yeah, I think that Blizzard is consciously thinking about that, because it seems now that even the tanks that have barriers on the PTR are going to act more in line with what we expect from the non-barrier tanks. So in a way, they're, getting rid of that binary where you could just run, like, I think it could be entirely possible that like something like Roadhog and Diva, or Roadhog and Zarya, probably more likely, ends up being a actual comp, because those two characters are really good at breaking barriers, so that won't be a problem for them. And they're really good at face tanking, which is something that all tanks are going to be having to do more of now. So I hope that is Blizzard's goal, because that opens up a lot of variety for tank players. Because if you're just a tank play right now, you kind of have to say you're a main tank or an off tank player, which really just says you're part of these two subsets of characters. But in reality, you should be playing all tanks, because you don't want to be restricted to just 4 heroes or less when, you know, DPS players get like 15 to choose from. Like, that's not good, and Blizzard knows that. So this is part of helping that, I think. I hope.
Is there anything else that sort of springs to mind of general trends or things that you've noticed that might not be seemingly obvious after you playing on the PTR as well? Is there some stuff that we may not be seeing based off just reading the patch notes?
Well, there's probably going to be something that is underneath all this, because like, this is the thing, like I said at the start, on the surface this all looks really good, but there are a lot of fears that are coming up, especially from, you know, most competitive players, saying like, oh, this isn't going to change the experience effectively because Orisa is still going to be the best tank.
How does that work then? Because on the face of it, I saw Swimmer tweet something like this, and I think he got laughed off Twitter at this point, but why do people still think that like Orisa Sigma can still be meta after taking such a big hit to, you know, it is the double barrier meta after all, and they've been hit hard? Why would we still get Orisa Sigma as like the main tanks?
So it's just, again, because barriers are still strong. Like, barriers in Overwatch do so much, and they counter so many things, that if you're nerfing it across the board, then is it really nerfed at all? And because the other team is going to have nerfed barriers as well. So what really happens is that the time that both teams are interacting with barriers is shorter, but there's still going to be time where that happens. And if, like, you know, it's like a shield battle like that you have right now. Like, if you had a Reinhardt with 2,000 shield health versus a Reinhardt with 1,600 shield health, the one with the bigger shield's going to win the games more often. So if you nerf all barriers, is it still going to be a game of who has the best barriers? It might be.
It's almost like Mario Kart when you have like the 50, 100 and 150cc cars. Like, you move faster or slower depending on what you pick, but so does everybody else, so it makes no difference to how the races sort of run.
It's basically like the difference between Street Fighter and Street Fighter Turbo, where, yeah, it's faster, but it's the same game. And that's kind of what Overwatch is going to be, at least in the form of shield battling. The shield battles will be faster, but they're still shield battles, and you still want to win them. Now, that being said, there's still going to be other parts of the game that will be important, because with Double Barrier previously, there was no end to a shield battle. Like, the barriers would always be up. Shooting them was almost a waste of time, unless your name was Bastion or Symmetra. So now we're going back to shield battling, where there is an actual end of the battle. But don't you still want more barriers? So double barrier might still be a thing that we do. It'll just be different from the double barrier meta that we know now, because the shields will actually be destroyed. And does that mean that we want Reinhardt instead, because then we have the most barrier? Or does that mean we're going to play Reinhardt and Sigma, or Reinhardt and Orisa to still have double barrier because we want the most barrier because barriers are good? All of those are possibilities. But just the fact that now there is going to be time between barrier fights where there aren't any, whereas with double barrier, it was just always 100% uptime. Certain things are going to be good again that just weren't viable before, like hooking someone with Roadhog, or sniping someone with Widowmaker, or things like that, or hitting people with an anti-nade. Like, those things you just couldn't do before in double barrier meta, but now you could, or now you can.
Overall, so tanks, DPS, and support, whose stonks have gone up the most, do you think?
Well, I definitely think Ana is getting a serious boost in stonks, due to the fact that she's always been affected by barriers, both because she can't heal through barriers, and her anti-nade, which is like one of the best abilities in the whole game, just doesn't work in double barrier meta. Like, you have to flank or do something crazy with Ana to get an anti-nade right now. But now you could just shoot the shield a few times, go for it, and then, you can win the whole game. Moira is getting nerfed, so I think Baptiste is going to shine a bit more because he will now have the most healing in the game. Therefore, he will be described as the best healer, probably. And, it's not like Immortal Field is going away anytime soon. Immortal Field is basically going to be the new double barrier. Whereas, if you could get that in a spot where it can't be killed, then you're invincible, then you don't need a barrier. So Baptiste is probably going to go up in a few areas. I think heroes like Mei and Reaper are probably still going to be good. And just because they are still good, it probably means that you are not going to see that much change in the tank meta. Because, the big reason why people don't play things like Reinhardt, Winston, Roadhog, etc. is because Mei and Reaper exist. Those heroes are so hard anti-tank that they counter the whole class outright. It's not like they counter a specific tank. It's like they counter tanks. So you have to pick the tanks that are the most resistant to them, and it turns out Orisa and Sigma are the most resistant to them. And it's kind of the same with Sombra, who might also come back into the meta because she did get buffed, but it didn't matter because it was double barrier meta. So it's like she never builds ult charge, but now she will. So Sombra is just going to be a nuisance, and that's not good for the game, but maybe DPSs will get adjusted later. I know they already think that Widowmaker is going up because they preemptively nerfed Widowmaker, and she deserves it, but they probably should have preemptively nerfed some other heroes too. And hit scans like McCree, Soldier, they're just going to be good. Ashe as well. They're just going to be good just because hit scan is good, just not against barriers. There's also World War Symmetra comes back because her barrier didn't get nerfed. So I've already seen a bit more Symmetra in solo queue lately because, it turns out triple barrier is still kind of good. And it might see more of it soon, in my opinion. I think most other characters are going to be pretty fine. I know Genji got buffed. It's not a huge deal. Zenyatta probably still not good enough. Wrecking Ball probably still good. Still gets countered by Mei and Reaper.
Well, I was going to say about the other tanks, like Diva, Zarya, Wrecking Ball. What about the other tanks that we haven't spoken about? Where do they sort of land in this? Or is there just not enough of an impact for them specifically?
Well, Diva got a small buff, but it's pretty irrelevant. Diva really got nerfed with the range change from 15 meters to 10 on the defense matrix. And until that comes back, assuming that they ever want it to come back, Diva's just going to be really, really hard to play.
Why does that change make such a difference? Because on the face of it, it doesn't seem like that crazy, just reducing the range on something. Big wow. Why is it that Diva has really suffered from that? Because you're not the first to say that.
Well, Diva, when Diva was meta, it was during GOATs. And in GOATs, everyone sticks together because that's just how the comp works. So for some reason, Blizzard thought, oh, we know how to fix it. We'll nerf the range of Diva's matrix. But all that did was nerf Diva in dive, and it nerfed Diva in pretty much any comp that isn't GOATs. Because for GOATs Diva, she didn't care, so of course Diva stayed strong in GOATs. Then they nerfed everything, and GOATs died, and then Rolq happened, and Diva still has 10 meter matrix. Now, when you're trying to actually save someone, you can't reach them anymore. Because in a dive situation, or just any comp that isn't GOATs, Diva really suffers to actually protect people.
Yeah, she was amazing as a third tank, but trash as a second.
Right. And I don't know what they're going to have to do to her. Maybe they give her back her old armor health, but they just buffed armor, so I don't know if they would do that. But Diva as a tank is just kind of in a weird spot, and they're gonna keep changing her. They have to. She's one of their freaking star characters. So, but in the next patch, will she be any good? I mean, she could, because when you think about it, it kind of goes back to what we said about barriers before. Because way back in season 3, when people would pick Diva even just as a second tank, before we got the ideas of picking 3 tanks, we were just like, oh man, Diva's matrix is basically better than a barrier because it lasts longer than a barrier. Because that was 4 seconds of matrix, and that would absorb more damage than what a 2000 health Reinhardt barrier could absorb in some cases.
Would be, yeah, like Orisa's barrier now, isn't it, really? Like, it lasts 4 seconds against a hog, so it's the same amount of time.
Right. So now we might be in a situation where D.Va's Matrix is actually a better method of damage absorption than a barrier. So you might see D.Va. It's possible. But you're still going to have to deal with things like unmatrixable items like Roadhog Hook, for example, right? Sigma boulders, I guess.
And finally, where can people see more of you playing? I mean, who are you going to be playing at this point, I guess, is another big question.
I'm actually going to play more Orisa. I've been playing a bit more of it even these days on stream. But after seeing these notes for Orisa, I want to try playing her again, just one trick style, which will probably just be the way to play her anyway. But there's also some room to try more flank Orisa strategies. And that'll be exciting. And if you want to see the #1 flank Orisa, the only flank Orisa, then you'll find it at twitch.tv/eviltoaster. You can also follow my Twitter at eviltoaster.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Again, do definitely check out Evil Toaster. He is a very knowledgeable guy. Thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time.